If forced to explain the creative musician's basic objective in elementary terms, I would say that a composer writes music to express and communicate and put down in permanent form certain thoughts, emotions and states of being. These thoughts and emotions are gradually formed by the contact of the composer's personality with the world in which he lives. He expresses these thoughts, musical thoughts which are not to be confused with literary ones, in the musical language of his own time. So explained the American composer Aaron Copland the aim of the composer. But if Arnold Schoenberg says in his Style and Idea, the relaxation which a satisfied listener experiences when he can follow an idea, its development and reason for such development is closely related, psychologically speaking, to a feeling of beauty, we must understand that, accordingly to this Schoenberg definition, music does not depend only on the idea itself, but also on its performance. The composer, unless he is a performer himself, has no possibility to express his idea in its integrity. He is able only to indicate precisely the pitch and duration of notes and approximately their loudness and attack. The composer of the past cannot authorize contemporary interpretation, but, on the other hand, the performer of today has to face the tradition of the greatest performances which defend the idea of the compositions. The contemporary composer, collaborating with the performer, is able to establish the tradition of interpretation which, due to the state of modern communication media, can reach around the world. I was very pleased to be able to meet Mr. Luciano Berio at his master class given at the University of Adelaide on the 11th September 1975. I had another reason, other than one of pure interest. I have been devoted for many years to the interpretation of compositions for solo flute and, as a result, Easter 72 in Stockholm I taped Flute Anthology, which is the selection of compositions for solo flute, ranging through a period of more than 250 years and covering a program for 3 LP recordings. This complete starts with Partita A minor by Johann Sebastian Bach and finishes with some 20th century works of modern composition techniques. We cannot imagine the last one without Berio's Sequenza per flauto solo, which has already become a really classical piece of its genre. Meeting and discussing Sequenza with Mr. Luciano Berio was a very challenging event for me for two reasons. When I was in contact, in some cases in direct collaboration with all contemporary composers of the anthology, as Czech Jan Rychlík, Jan Klusák, or Romanian Anatol Vieru, I met Mr. Luciano Berio for the first time here in Adelaide. So it was a confrontation between his conception and my interpretation, which I had to create from the text in which even the duration of notes is indicated only approximately. Secondly, my recording has to match an already established tradition of great performers of modern music, such as Severino Castelloni, who have enormous credit for the development of modern music.
This morning when I came here, Mr. Bruderhans played for me a recording made of a work of mine, Sequenza for solo flute, and I found this recording really quite astonishing, beautiful. And he expressed the desire to discuss this in front of you with me. I can say a few words about this piece in general, the attitude I had in relation to a series of sequenza pieces for solo instruments, which I've been writing during the last several years. My main concern in this work was not only to develop a certain view of the soloist, of the virtuoso performer, of very high quality, but not only technical quality, but also, I would say, intellectual quality, in the sense that I refer to a performer who is able to play, music of today, but as well music of the other time. And I'm concerned mainly with one problem, to try to superimpose different types of attitude, of a technical attitude, if sometimes even a musical attitude. This sequence for flute was the first one, and with flute instrument, which is monodic by excellence, is the most monodic instrument maybe exists, even from the point of view of timbre. Is one of the most purest timbre. And I was interested in create a certain amount of density, that so that this long line for solo flute could be listened almost in a polyphonic way. We can for a moment consider any musical event. We can divide it, we can observe it from different points of view, from the pitch point of view, the frequency point of view, from the time point of view, dynamic point of view, from the morphology point of view. A more accurate description, pitch, frequency point of view, in the sense not only in relation between different pitches, between different notes, let's say, but also the degree of changing of the pattern of changing of these pitches. So let's suppose a line that very wide intervals, very wide jumps in itself, can be considered on the light of a maximum value. In fact, for each of these parameters, you can think in terms of plus, average, 0, or minus. So either a great contrasted sequence of notes in register, or extremely complex relations between notes. And we know now, without going to that, we know that an octave and a fifth are very simple in a way, in our musical terms, in our culture, much simpler than a major 7 or a minor 9th and so on. Dynamics, that goes without saying, again, either extreme dynamics or patterns of extreme contrast in dynamics. Time, again, can be seen in two ways. One, either maximum speed of articulation of a certain lines, or maximum contrasting, discontinuous, irregular, even more complex relation between time values. And the morphological aspect, I would say, anything that changes the familiar image of the instrument. I mean, ideally, when we think of flute, we think of Debussy or Mozart or whatever you want. Anything that technically can affect that image, and that is rather subjective, I must say, belongs in a way to the morphological aspect of the work. So again, here, maximum transformation, medium or minimal transformation of the image. So more or less the work is based on this, having two of these parameters constantly at the maximum value, no matter which is this, either this 2 or this 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, so that a certain amount of density of information, I would say, is guaranteed. That contributes. This is valid for any type of, I would say, for any type of music. I was very sensitive to controlling this with the flute with a flute piece, because I want, in fact, to invite the listener to listen to it in a kind of polyphonic sense more than a melodic sense. Of course, now in music now, the single line cannot be heard polyphonically as you hear a Bach sonata, because of harmonic process implied in a melody in a line by Bach, so that in a way the harmonic implication must be exposed here, must be invented, must be suggested on a completely different scale, on a completely different level. It's exactly on this, along this idea that at a certain moment the flute, for instance, has to produce two sounds simultaneously, to suggest constant presence of a polyphonic attitude with the monodic instrument. And this is also why the piece is very difficult to perform, because the great speed of changing, and dynamic change in register, and going to noise. Very often there's a very high noise content in the part. Exactly again to suggest this. In later frequenza, of course, sequenza, I developed this in another way, like the vocal sequenza for voice solo, or a sequenza for trombone solos. And there it was easier in a way to create either in reality a simultaneity of different events produced by the single performance, or such as change that connect with psychological state, like in sequenza for voice, that sometimes suggest the presence of 2-3 persons at one time singing, performing this vocal thing. But the flute was the first, and I think was the triggering piece for a long series of research I made in music with soloists.
You mentioned in your lecture before that the modern music tend to some atomizing of the music expression, and that is really the case of this sequenza, at least from point of view of performer. That is no, for instance, pausation, which is a constructive, very important element for creation of the integral of composition. They are not hierarchic harmonic relation which makes subordination and substantial organization. All is and naturally from this reason it's we can't approach and try to build, and as in the for instance, let's say sonata form, when they are contraposing of two contrasting subjects, yes, and now the confrontation between them plus confrontation of some metric interlude, etc., etc. This was really, as I said, atomization. Yes, if you agree with it. Perhaps we could, if we could compare this one, this drama. So the classical drama has to follow some unity of place, unity of times, and that is its 5 exposition, conflict, catastrophe. However, there's 5 parts of classical drama.
3 parts.
3 parts. Sorry, I'm not so familiar. I think that that could be compared with drama which is called absurd drama, UNESCO or Samuel Beckett, Havel, which really introduce as some kind of mosaic, and then you have to follow. You are really deeply involved, much deeply, because it is not the drama is not developed in the way as process conflict. Yes, now that's some mosaic. Yes, and now very often in such a drama, with the last word, with the sentence, now it appears the whole idea of the drama and its integral. What I think that I mentioned this you see this to make and bow, you see, as in exposition of sonata form. Yes, that was not possible to make here, but it was very necessary for me to make some very nuanced attack, expression on and nuancing of each tone, because each tone is has its articulation value, as Frenchmen say, attack, as in Messiaen, I think that
mode of attack.
Yeah, mode attack, and that really we know that those attacks are an integral part, even in classical music, but then they are more, if we could say so, autonomous. Yes, and that is perhaps a confrontation, which is necessary to be done. This
going more concrete terms. When he speaks about atomization, which in a way is right, what is atomized that work? At least three things. One, there is a kind of recognizable cell, three-note cell.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes.
Every time this cell is a kind of conditioning cell. Every time it comes back, no matter which beat notes, you perceive it as that cell, see? As a kind of then there's a constant tension to go into the noise, either through various technique. There's a main episode. Finally, the development toward noise is so clear that is emphasized by the fact that Salomon used the noise of the keys of the instrument. Yeah? The breathing goes away, and the noise of the keys taking place. It's a kind of symbolic, that noise is not to suggest constantly that this transition from sound to noise, from simple situation to complex situation, is always present. And then there are tones of different length, more of a kind of a physiological nature, usually as long as your breath can hold it some time, rather free. It can last 7 seconds, it can last 10, doesn't make any change. Then this interaction with these three basic elements, which are in a way are atomized. Sometimes they connect very, very quickly. They exchange between themselves very quickly, is what it means.
was Sequenza 1 for flute by Luciano Berio, performed by Zdeněk Bruderhans.